So one of the problems with technology and AI is the lens that you look through it, okay? So we know we've gone through the Gen AI hype. We know we're sitting somewhere on the agentic AI agent hype cycle. But there's an interesting article that you've spoken about where you talk about the AI quad. So maybe you can open that discussion up, and it leads to many interesting aspects.
Yes, I think this is an important point because there's a lot of discussion about AI, the benefits of AI, the AI. Some people are calling it an AI hype. Other people are saying, look, this is just a bubble, it's going to burst. And I think we have to reframe the whole discussion because AI is actually being driven by, I mentioned the AI quad, but if we take a step back, there is actually a geopolitical context to this, which is driving this whole AI race.
Very interesting.
And AI, like any other technology, it's an advantage for certain countries. So, for example, I have always asked people, why do you think there is such a tremendous coverage on AI? Is this normal? There has to be something behind it. And then when you look at it from a geopolitical point of view, things begin to make sense that the country that reaches, let's say, AGI first, that will have a supreme advantage over its competitors. Because through AGI, you'll be able to solve all sorts of problems. And by solving those problems can be then commoditized into products. So your economy will grow. Similarly, those solutions, they can have a military application. And that basically means that you will have an edge over your adversary, in this case, America and China. So both of these countries are at loggerheads with each other in terms of achieving the AI supremacy. And I think that's probably the most important lens to use in order to understand the whole discussion about AI quad, and what's happening within the corporate world, and so forth.
It's interesting that in the past I'd not looked at AI in a geopolitical sense, but looking at the Russia-Ukraine war, which has been primarily fought over the ability to rapidly develop drones and perform what would otherwise have been individual reconnaissance activities. So that side is actually registered very well. But I could play the devil's advocate and say, well, what is the geopolitics on chips? Okay. I mean, is it chips?
You're right. You're right. I mean, if you break down the AI, let's say, components, at the end of the day, every country has a AI stack.
Yeah.
That gives it, sovereignty. So the challenge that some countries they have is that they want to establish a technology stack that is completely independent, and they have full control over it. Now, very few countries in the world have an independent technology stack. But if you look at, for example, America and to some degree China, they're probably the only countries that have an independent technology stack. And that gives them the ability to push AI in a certain direction. Every other country is actually borrowing from or copying from either the American technology stack or from the Chinese technology stack. So effectively what you have a bipolar technology order. If you apply this within the context of, let's say, chips, I mean, if we break down the technology stack, what you have at the basic components, you have chips. At the right at the top, you have applications.
Right.
So chips and applications together, they give you complete control. Now, if someone is buying American chips, American applications, then to some degree, they don't have control. They don't have control over the chips, over the supply chain. They don't even have control over the applications, but they're using them. And if you look at Europe today, you find that really they don't have their own independent technology stack. They claim they do, but fundamentally they're using American chips. So if you're using American chips, possibility there is a backdoor that can be manipulated by certain, you can say, spy masters or surveillance, and that can be detrimental.
It's one of the conflicts between China and America, with Huawei sitting right in the middle of it in relation to the 5G communications equipment, because of the concern that 5G communication will carry that backdoor, which will give rise to industrial espionage. The more I look at these events in this perspective, you can actually see the political aspect on the AI and the chip aspect.
Yes.
I was reading about this, okay? And something similar has happened in the past over encryption machines post 1945. So there's a company called Crypto AG that used to provide encryption during the war. Post-war, it carried on providing encryption machines for individual countries to discuss privately amongst themselves. And later on, much later on, it was actually found out that there was a backdoor that, let's just say, one key country had. And so it puts a perspective that organizations have to be very careful about which tech stack that they take up, right?
Correct. I just want to go back to the point about the 5G, because if we break this down, I mean, you have a technology stack, and AI sitting on top of the technology stack. So you've got algorithms, you've got data, you've got energy, and you've got applications, right? So energy is actually needed to, power the chips, the application, and so forth. So if these components are indigenous, then you have full control. Now, when you talked about 5G, the reason America was, let's say, uncomfortable with the Chinese technology, because 5G networks allow potentially your competitor or your adversary to mine data. And what does AI need? If we in this quest for AI supremacy, then AI algorithms, they need to be fed data. So if you connect the 5G with Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative, which is serving somewhere between 69 to about 90 countries, about 4 billion people, you can automatically see how much data is going to be potentially harvested, collected, and that can be fed into your AI models, which then gives you an incremental edge. No, but it gives you a tremendous edge over your competitor in this race for AGI.
I mean, this naturally leads into the discussion about data, you see. So we all know most countries have regulations about at least banking or personal data has to be on servers sitting in the mainland, okay? Yet the servers are actually based on a technology stack that is either American or Chinese. So there's a sense of contradiction in this policy, if you think about it, that it must be on servers that are in your country, yet the tech stack on which it exists is actually alien to you, which then raises the whole question of, to what extent is the data secure on somebody else's server?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of countries, they've actually gone for a certain type of technology stack, working towards, let's say, AI solution for their domestic environment. And some of them are fully aware that this is actually a dangerous setup, because if you have sensitive industries, so you mentioned privacy. So that's a huge concern for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But also you have countries that have sensitive industries, military, aerospace, research and development, and so forth. So the last thing that you want is someone using the different technology stacks that belongs to a foreign entity that can actually snoop and spy and collect some sensitive information that gives them a dramatic edge, especially if those countries, they go into maybe some type of conflict or trade war or physical military conflict. Then it becomes a very, very dangerous scenario.
So for an organization that's actually got China as a customer and maybe the US as a customer, purely from a business sense, they need to be careful about what servers they hold their data on, and actually even the algorithms that they use for that processing. Yeah.
Well, I think the algorithms are actually produced by very few countries.
Yeah.
And algorithms, they come with conditions, they come with licenses. The countries that are writing the algorithms, they're also writing the laws, rules, and regulations, how those algorithms should be used. So you're actually using someone else's algorithm, thinking that you can potentially use it for solving some problems that you want to solve in your business, but potentially it still has a backdoor.
Yeah. But there is an alternative here. You see, in principle, all I need to do to develop algorithms is a computer. So my dependency on algorithms from one geopolitical tech stack versus another geopolitical tech stack is mitigated, isn't it? Because I can hire a whole number of people, say, okay, I want you to develop an algorithm that does facial recognition or security analysis or cybersecurity, so on and so forth. And I see an opportunity for emerging markets to do this leapfrog. But then the question arises, back to the chip discussion, is do you have access to the powerful chips that are required to do the necessary processing?
I think this is a dilemma for most countries and for most organizations, because even if you have access to an algorithm, open source, and you can improve that algorithm, but the algorithm is not going to be much use unless you have chips. But if your GPUs and TPUs, they're being produced by a handful of companies that belong to a certain country, then that algorithm, will not be able to fulfill its function or give you that competitive edge. Now, what you can do, like you said, you can mitigate, and you can have algorithms probably from, let's say, LLM from France, from America, from China, but still there's the same underlying problem.
You see, now for us, we're all sitting on this Chat GPT and Perplexity and Claude and so on and so forth. DeepSeek did something interesting, right? Okay. And being an engineer at heart, I was quite impressed by it, because what they did was, as engineers, they trimmed down the algorithmic activities, resulting in a reduction in the computation requirements. Yes, we know they also use ChatGPT to do the training, so on and so forth. But what that suggests is that there may even be potential opportunities in the way you do the Gen AI training. So we all know that when you get an algorithm function and it gives results and you want to commercialize it, you go down that path. You don't spend so much time optimizing it. We all know the distinction between Unix and Microsoft in the early days, the security of Unix versus the security of Microsoft, yet the success was actually Microsoft, not Unix. And I wonder whether there is more opportunities here for developing world or for countries who don't have the immense resources of the developed countries to buy those GPUs and TPUs, so on and so forth, to then go visit the algorithm and do it in a way that may not be as good as ChatGPT, but then be good enough such that you and I as a new user will want that.
I think that's a great point. For those countries that don't have the resources and they want to solve AI problems that are not really complex, that don't require a lot of compute power,
Yeah.
then adopting something like DeepSeek and playing around with it with, let's say, third or fourth generational GPUs or TPUs, and I think that makes perfect sense. They should be encouraged to actually do that. However, I want to make the point, there is a certain method of thinking within the Silicon Valley, which is that if we use brute force in terms of increasing compute power, increasing the amount of data, writing sophisticated algorithms,
Absolutely.
right, and then supplying a limited amount of energy, we should be able to reach AGI very, very quickly. Related to this is that you don't find many guardrails or, let's say, many controls, because the whole idea is to get to AGI ASAP. Hence, innovation becomes stymied, becomes a secondary thought. Innovation is actually sacrifice. However, if you impose chip controls on an adversary or someone else, then you find that they become much more innovative.
Absolutely. This whole discussion of the geopolitics of chips is interesting, because with now the current conflict that's occurring between America and China, you see little Taiwan sitting in there, just at the bottom of China.
Yeah.
And it's manufacturing the largest number of chips. So how do you see that conflict being resolved? You just don't set up a chip manufacturing plant tomorrow. There's a lot of learning to do along that. And even though Trump before that, Biden actually passed a chip law, didn't he? I see this dependency on Taiwan, and hence the sword of Damocles hanging over anybody who uses chips intensely.
Well, I think you've categorized it really well. I mean, AI effectively is a geopolitical actor
Yeah,
playing
very nice.
to two huge, you can say, geopolitical actors. One is China, the other is America. So in the case of Taiwan, I mean, there are some discussions that chip plants producing the latest chips are already being set up, but it takes time to actually build factories.
Yeah.
So America and China, but they both have to secure their supply chains of chips, because chips are integral to the AI Quad, which is an integral to the race for AGI. So in this context, it's going to be very, very difficult. America still has the edge because American companies, they have the monopoly in terms of chip design and the compute power that's required for AI application. But you can see that this distance is actually being closed very, very quickly. Now, the implications for perhaps the corporate world, which we have not discussed so far, and I think perhaps we need to, the implication for the corporate world is to what degree which stack do they go for in the first place? Because almost every technology stack has chips at the end of the day. And if tomorrow there is a trade war and America decides to revoke licenses in terms of using latest, let's say, American chips for AI, then if you're running a supercomputer and you're based in Europe and you have this trade, let's say, type of conflict, you could be deprived of latest supply of American chips. Hence, your compute power could be affected, which means that your quest for, let's say, AGI or for complex AI applications becomes problematic. Corporates, they need to bake in a certain level of risk. Now, some corporations, what they do, they have both stacks. They have a Chinese stack, they have the American stack, and they're developing their own stack. Their own stack may not be that good because they won't have access to the latest chips, but at least they have some degree of sovereignty, independence, so they can't be shut off.
It's an interesting discussion when you go down the path of real advanced AI. I'm resisting using the word AGI just because I think there's still a lot to go before we achieve AGI. I haven't sensed in my readings this concern within the corporate world about the tech stack and the geopolitical nature.
No, because this is absent. Most of the corporate world is just driven by this immense publicity that AI is a panacea.
Yeah.
AI is going to solve all problems. It is going to be this magical, you can say, automation drive that will shoot your productivity through the roof. You actually don't need human beings. So they have been fed this diet of this is what AI is going to do. And if that becomes, let's say, the lens or the prism by which you are going to look at AI, then you're not really going to think about the implications of, let's say, geopolitics and AI. However, corporations and industries, they are located in countries. It's the job of the governments and politicians to devise technology type of strategies that give the country an independence, and that should be fed into the industries, into the corporations to take the right type of actions when it comes to deciding, which particular technology stack we should go for.
It's an interesting discussion of how the dependency of corporations in terms of the adoption of just compute power, actually, and then AI, the extent to which the government actually needs to take a very mature approach to it. Again, you don't see a lot of that coming along.
No.
You don't see that at all.
What you do see is some governments, some countries spending a lot of money to buy, you can say, the technology. Maybe not the transfer of technology, but to buy the technology, or to build data centers, or to build, let's say, nuclear power stations or other forms of energy grids that are going to supply energy to these AI systems. You see a lot of that, but what you don't see is thinking around building completely new technology stacks or new way of, let's say, looking at the AI quad so that you become independent of both Chinese and American technology. You don't find that.
I also find it an odd approach to AI. Historically, technology has never replaced human beings. It's always augmented our activities. And one of my fears about really this whole approach to AI and Gen AI and now Agentic AI and AGI is that this drive to replace human beings. I grew up at a time when my physics teacher had a slide rule, and I had the first Casio LED calculator.
You're showing your age there.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I have no problems there. And he'd do the calculation on the slide rule faster than I'd do the calculator. He didn't have a problem with the adoption of that technology. And obviously curriculums changed by which calculators became an integral part of our activities, and it just augmented our activities. The subject of technology now in the scale that we're talking is scary, because it's scary in the sense that it's focusing on replacing human beings. Now, there's one of the commentators, I forget his name. He talks about, not talk about automating jobs, let's talk about automating tasks. When you automate tasks, you're actually augmenting human behavior now. And technology has always augmented human behavior. And so there's a bit of me that becomes a bit skeptical about AGI for more than one reason. There are epistemological reasons about it being sentient or not. But what really threw me off is the discussions between Kissinger and Schmidt over AGI. Maybe Schmidt I wouldn't be that worried about, but Kissinger being the master of realpolitik, it sheds almost a different perspective on the way they want to see the adoption of AGI.
I think in our conversation so far, this is probably the most profound point to actually raise. Technology, by definition, is actually agnostic.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It has the ability to do both good and bad, and it's driven. It's driven actually by civilizational values.
Yes, that's right.
And it depends on your value system.
Absolutely.
So if we accept that technology itself is agnostic, even though you can augment it by machine intelligence, it's still technology.
Yeah.
It's still a tool.
Yeah.
But it's going to be driven by a set of values. Now, if in a certain part of the world, the value system is that profit means more than any other value there is within society,
Absolutely.
then sure, you are going to have this quest amongst certain sections of society to create an autonomous workforce, devoid of any human, you can say, workings or augmentation. I mean, human beings are totally sidelined. So that's a value discussion.
Yeah.
Similarly, in other parts of the world, you find that the values are such where tools, technology, and so forth should be subservient to human beings. So human beings should always have command over technology. So in that case, you would produce a completely different society. It's not about replacing human beings. It's about helping human beings to become better at certain things. So this philosophical point is actually missing in the discourse.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And there is another, you can say, philosophical path. So the first path is where most civilizations, the way they view technology is that it should be subservient to human beings. Some, they view technology to be, let's say, dominating human beings, and human beings are irrelevant. And there is, you can say, another subsection, they actually believe in posthumanism, which is AI types of, let's say, devices or technology becomes integrated into human beings so that human beings, they evolve. Now, if these are the philosophical paths and corporations unknowingly adopt these paths, they are going to go in a certain direction.
Yes.
So some corporations are going to go, well, we want to replace all humans.
Yes.
Others will say, no, we want human beings to basically become productive with the help of technology. So it has huge implications.
I mean, you open up the subject of the value system. And even if you set that aside, and I'm not saying it's not important, any corporation has to look carefully about the way it adopts AI. In the current economic scenario, there's always a drive for efficiency, reducing costs, minimizing errors and all that sort of stuff. And invariably, the C-suite will focus on adopting AI to reduce that. And you end up reducing what are the weaknesses of human beings. But the more fundamental point is that what delivers value to a corporation are its processes. And if the corporation is not objectively looking at redesigning processes in order to look at more growth areas, improve productivity, or absolutely new business models, then its adoption of AI can be problematic. So once you automate a process, it'll remain that until the end of time. So there's no scope for regeneration of processes.
Yeah,
Whatever.
You're probably familiar with my background. I mean, I did a lot of work with RPA, and if you don't really fix the process, you would actually automate the bad behaviors or the bad process flows. So nothing will actually change. So with AI, it's very important to make sure that the processes are fixed. But I just want to take a step back. There is a very important point that I think corporations, enterprises, businesses, they fail to actually understand. The way they look at AI is like any other technology.
Yes,
it's not.
That's right.
And the attitude is, bring a vendor in, here's a use case, make it work. And this approach is actually leading to failure.
Yes.
I mean, majority of the pilots actually don't scale because when they realize we have a fundamental problem here, the ROI doesn't stack up, or we have an ESG policy that's talking about being carbon neutral, and this is actually becoming so intensive that is increasing my carbon footprint. So people, they need to take a step back and really understand AI. And in that context, you need to have an AI strategy that's integrated with your corporate strategy so that the C-suite can make the right decisions. Otherwise, they are going to make wrong decisions, and in some case, catastrophic decisions, which you have already seen in the media.
Yeah.
That so many people were fired now.
They'll bring them back.
They're desperate to bring them back, or AI is making lots of mistakes because the guardrails weren't there, whether it's to do with bias, governance, and so forth.